Welcome back to another edition of Pop of Genius on Urban Politics, where we talk about trending topics and we bring in biblical truths, science, and a lot of my opinion. And today's video is stemming back on these upcoming disclosures, the past disclosures we've had, and a little bit more history on what this galactic federation is. It's a demonic galactic federation, and it's all based in biblical facts and also too science that even our branches of government have been monitoring and studying for decades. And there's also a lot of esoteric and mysticism and occultism behind this demonic galactic federation, these interdimensional beings that I call demons, workers of the devil. And again, this goes back to the Revelations chapter 16, verses 13 through 14, with the unclean frog spirit. And it says that, and I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the world to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. And if you don't know what that great day of a battle is, it's an Armageddon that takes place in the place of Megiddo. Do you know where Megiddo is at? Israel. There is an apostle in the Bible by the name of Apostle John. He was given a vision, and this is what is detailed throughout the entire book of Revelations. And it's interpreted that he saw these current beings that we are seeing. We call them aliens. However, John, with his antiquities education and not being given the type of advancement in technology and understanding that we've called them aliens. Back then, they looked like frogs to him in this vision. And John was given this revelation of these interdimensional beings even then. Now, there are several beings that the United States government, the Pentagon, has verified that they have had communication with, and that they can, without a doubt, confirm that there are 4 species. Okay, now there are more than 4 species, but I want to remind you that there are good beings and there are evil beings. Good beings are angels that are still in the heavenly realms with God. The Bible says that we can entertain angels at any time, and those are of his realm. But then there are demons, and these are the things that are being visible, are making their announcement to our society, because it is based off of this timeline that's occurring right now. And I want to make sure that we also don't forget that in that Bible verse, it says that the deceiver or the false prophet, I just want to let you know that I've done a lot of material on Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner represents that false prophet. I'm not saying it's him, but he does represent that particular person. And it's so strange that since he has this first group that's mentioned in this galactic federation are the Nordics. Now, they are the ones that possibly have the connection to humans with the Rh negative blood types. Those who have red or very blonde hair, very Nordic looking types of human beings. They are very similar to these type of persons. The mantis. Okay, we'll talk about the mantis. And I feel as if God gave me a personal revelation that describes what this mantis looking alien is. People forget about Beelzebub, the term in the Bible, Beelzebub. Beelzebub is also described in more popular times as being Lord of the Flies. In a lot of these accounts where people feel as if they have been abducted or under some type of demonic experience where they're taken in their dreams or physically being manifested by these entities, they describe that there's some type of hierarchy in the experience, that the small little green ones are subjected under the taller large insectate praying mantis looking ones. And I do believe that the mantis looking ones are very much more in leadership, possibly being, the Bible describes that the unseen world has divisions, it has dominions and kingdoms that we can't see with the natural eye. And so these mantis Beelzebubs, Lord of the Flies, they're also another extraction from the Bible during the plague in Exodus. God used the frogs, he also used the locusts. So locusts, praying mantis, flies, those are all in the same category with these meteors. I don't think that they're regular meteors. I think that they are something else.
It was actually a meteor. It's a surprising flash in the sky.
Oh, what the was that?
And a startling sonic boom. Seen and heard across at least 10 states Tuesday morning.
A boom! Like that. Like bah! Like that.
And this morning we know that mystery fireball was actually a meteor exploding as it entered the atmosphere.
It was moving about 40,000 miles per hour. And when that thing hits the atmosphere that fast, it generates a lot of light and it leaves this streak we call fireball.
According to NASA, the 6-foot wide, 7-ton space rock traveled 34 miles through the upper atmosphere before disintegrating over Medina County, Ohio.
It unleashed an energy of about 250 tons of TNT.
And people saw it. Reports from Ohio, Pennsylvania, down to Virginia and Kentucky, even as far away as Canada.
Anybody see or hear what blew up?
Definitely too big for fireworks.
The boom generating a shock wave strong enough to reach the ground below. Aisha Jones of Maple Heights, Ohio, had just put her children down for a nap when she heard the boom.
My whole house shook. I immediately thought that somebody ran into my house or something big had hit the house.
The many who heard that thunderous boom shortly after 2 o'clock this afternoon, a bang so loud it prompted a flood of 911 calls in towns along the South Shore and North Shore, all the way out to Metro West and even down to Rhode Island. Well, tonight the experts are telling us it was almost certainly a meteor big enough to create the shock waves that produced that sonic boom. Good evening, everyone. Ken McLeod with you. Quite a few people say the boom actually rattled their homes at precisely 11 minutes after 2. We've got team coverage of this somewhat strange event, so let's get started with the next.
Here it goes.
New England around 2 p.m. this afternoon, you probably felt or definitely heard a massive double boom that shook windows, rattled doors, and sent thousands of people scrambling to social media for answers. Initial reports had locals wondering if it was a sudden earthquake or a massive explosion. But tonight we have official confirmation from NASA and the American Meteor Society. Earth had a high-speed cosmic visitor. Right around 2:06 p.m. Eastern Time, a meteor measuring roughly 3 feet wide slammed into Earth's upper atmosphere, traveling at a staggering 75,000 miles per hour.
Here it goes. Second big sonic boom after these meteorites are just falling out of the sky. And then they tell us, oh no, it wasn't what you thought. When you're now hearing it in several states, that's alarming. We just heard about the one that happened in South Carolina, just happened a couple of months ago in Ohio and a couple of other states. And on this same weekend, South Carolina and now Massachusetts, all the way up to some people have said they have heard it in New Hampshire and have video proof. People, read Revelations chapter 16, 13, and 14. You'll thank me later. About these strange humanoids around DC. Time. You see these beings. They don't look 100% human. You know, they may be. They might be. I'm not for sure, but I think that it's very strange that they have reptilian features. Their facial movements are not normal. And this is not something like that's psychological or like Tourette's or anything like that. What is the RH negative and abductions? Now you're about to listen to some very detailed expert witnesses, accounts, explanations on how studies and CIA have connected all of this together.
All right, so this is, I guess, a different kind of video, but I think we should talk about it because it's about the CIA and it's been picked up a little bit by the news. So a whistleblower has essentially said that the agency used consumer genealogical DNA information to track human-alien hybrids. So let's break that down just a little bit. So when I say consumer genealogical information, I'm talking about like 23andMe, Ancestry.com. You pay to submit your information to them. And when I talk about these human-alien hybrids, what I think they're referring to are individuals called Nordics. And so I'm not talking about people from the Nordic, but I'm talking about people that is believed, right, in these circles that they possess this hybrid DNA. So they are hiding out in small towns because they possess this DNA and they don't want to be found by the government. So that's where that sort of idea comes from. These two individuals, Jason Giorgiani, were discussing it. He is a philosopher and author, and then Lynn Buchanan, who is retired U.S. Army and has done a lot of work in something called remote viewing. So I want to talk about what remote viewing is. That actually was a program by the CIA that was run from 1970 to 1995. And it was actually utilizing or trying to utilize, this is during the Cold War, ESP to obtain information on the Russians. So things like submarine movements, best places to put beacons, just general political intel, and I guess like this non-invasive way. It was formally shut down in 1995 because it was, I guess they figured that the information that they gleaned from it was too vague. And all of it was declassified. So you actually can go under FOIA and look for electronic copies of all of it if anyone's ever, interested. And an individual who worked on it, who's somewhat prominent, his name is Kit Green, and he is a former CIA scientist. He worked there for 20 years until he retired. He did a lot in terms of neuroscience, in terms of medical intelligence, a lot of work with Havana syndrome. And he has said that the CIA has this like backdoor workaround to get into these databases. So a couple of things I want to say. So these databases did not exist when Kit Green was there. Also, I think these databases have actually shown through like
Look, we know that Kit Green at the CIA has some program to access the 23andMe and like whatever Ancestry.com databases through some backdoor, and that they are screening the entire, whoever signs up for these services, for a specific genetic variance from the normal Homo sapiens population, which the CIA knows to be the genetic marker of these Nordic.
They hide in God King bloodlines. They hide in generation in bloodlines. Now, there's always been a seed war. Genesis chapter 3 describes a seed war, the first of 400 messianic promises of King Jesus. Genesis chapter 3 is describing it's 3:15. There's always going to be a war between our seed and your seed. And then you go over into the book of Daniel. He says, hey, the head is as gold, the shoulders are as silver. It goes down to brass, and it gets down to iron and clay mixed. And it says this whenever he interprets it in the book of Daniel, and their seed shall mix with yours. Talking about at the end times, that mixing of the seed's going to be a big priority. So if it's transgender, if it's transhuman, it's all about trans, which is transgression. That's what it's all about. The enemy, the supernatural enemy, wants to be able to say, see, this is not God's creation. This is our creation, and we own it. That's what they want to do.
Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and the Rh negative Atlantis connection. Very, very interesting. So you have not heard the last of these two criminals, and you're going to hear some more deep dives into them and how they were connected to studies with the Atlantis and with these extraterrestrial beings, and also mythological studies. And it's quite interesting, if I can say the least. And also, I'm going to talk about something that I found that it's not something that you see every day, but it belongs to this type of esoteric, hidden occult, and how that may also be connected to Atlantis. There's a whole nother realm within these encounters, as you can see, and it has to deal with the ocean.
What if the secret of Rh negative blood didn't come from space, but from a civilization that sank beneath the ocean? Keep watching, because by the end, you'll see why some researchers believe survivors of Atlantis may have carried that bloodline into the modern world. Plato described Atlantis as a vast island kingdom, technologically advanced, spiritually powerful, and ruled by half-divine kings, children of Poseidon, and mortal women. Plato said that they harnessed crystal energy, mastered geometry, and controlled the weather all 9,000 years before his time. But then, in a single night, Atlantis vanished, swallowed by the sea, after a great cataclysm. But what I find funny is most historians say that it's a myth. But what if it's a memory of a real event, a civilization so advanced that it seemed godlike?
Letting these helicopters around the Bahamas, and her and Epstein are island hopping down there. And the most interesting thing that they did is they went to Fidel Castro,
right,
and asked him for permission to dive on a site off the western end of Cuba, where Paulina Zalitsky, a kind of oceanographic archaeologist, marine archaeologist, had discovered an Atlantean city. And there are sonar scans of this thing. And it was reported for a while in the press, to the point where I distinctly remember, and I've got some photos of this in the piece I wrote, I distinctly remember that National Geographic said they were going to look into it, that it's interesting, we'll look into it, we'll send some people there. The story disappeared. And Paulina Zalitsky, okay, so it's in a part of Cuba that's near Mexico, between the western end of Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula, where we have Mayan pyramids, right?
Right.
So and the structure she found kind of looked Mayan.
How deep?
Here's the thing. The last time that piece of earth was above water was 50,000 years ago. 50,000 years ago. Now I'm going to come back to that time frame. So most people agree who've done Atlantis research, Atlantis was destroyed about 12,000 years ago.
Right.
So this is an early Atlantis. This is like way before the destruction, this site. This site went underwater 50,000 years ago. Atlantean city, an actual one. Okay?
So these are, what kind of, these are some sort of scans?
Yeah, based on like sonar.
How deep does it say this is?
It's...
See if we can find it, Steve.
Yeah, 650 meters below
Covering
sea level.
2 square
Depth of
kilometers.
650 meters below sea level.
How many how many feet is that? 650. How many feet is 650?
It's like times 3. 6 times 3
meters.
is like,
huh?
Something like 3,000 feet.
Really?
You can do the calculation on the side and let us know. Look, so she goes to Mexico, to Yucatan, to trace the potential connection to the Mayans. She's arrested in Mexico, severely interrogated, held under horrible conditions, and for no legitimate crime.
2,000 feet.
So Ghislaine Maxwell wanted to dive on this, see? She went to Castro with Epstein and asked permission to dive on this site. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe take the submarine down.
Yeah, you couldn't. I don't know how you would dive 2,000 feet.
Yeah,
but yeah, you'd have to have
take the submarine down. So anyway, they severely interrogate Paulina Zalitsky in Mexico, put the fear of God in her, and packed her up and sent her back to Canada where she came from, and she refused to ever discuss this subject again.
You know what I think is so strange is I found this, and it's connected to something called the Black Priesthood. Oh my gosh, that's a whole deep dive you have to do independently. We'll talk about that in another video. But I looked at this and I keep seeing things in regards to Rh negative, of course, being connected to the Basque people in Greenland. But I also see this being connected to something that we know of called Atlantis. And Atlantis was... they said that in one time it was mythological, but there's just too much historical writing and records of actual historians, philosophers that wrote in great detail about Atlantis. And there is descriptions of so many of these UAPs having access to the ocean, and all of these sightings that they're seeing, they're manipulating these devices at around speeds and the velocity that they travel through the air.
Is Atlantis real?
Yes.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, I'm part of a team, and I can't say much about this, that have researched Plato's dialogues where he discusses it. And if you do the archaeology basically around with the information he shares about the nature and geography and geology of Atlantis, we believe that there's data that is convincing that it existed and somehow encountered its demise through a catastrophic geological event around the Younger Dryas period, 12,900 or so years ago. And we're compiling the data to prove it. And we think we found the location on the seafloor where it is. And if we get a remotely operated vehicle with a camera, we might be able to even identify human-made structures that would be the proof.
Happened is Jacques Cousteau admitted to Robert Maxwell that the whole reason he went into oceanography was to find Atlantis. So Jacques Cousteau became incredibly world famous as an oceanographer and an oceanic explorer, but it's because he was obsessed with trying to find Atlantis that he got into that in the first place. And when she was fleeing the authorities after Epstein's murder, as she finally left New York City, she was a Manhattanite. When she finally left New York City, she gets this property in an isolated area of New Hampshire under a false name. And the name that she uses is Janet Marshall. Janet Marshall was actually called Janet Atlantis Marshall Stevenson. And sometimes she published under the name Janet Stevenson. She used all these names. But Janet Atlantis Marshall was a feminist author who wrote this book called Departure about a woman on an old sailing vessel.
Very strange that Jeffrey Epstein had donated to several universities and research organizations. They have their own ocean nonprofit organization that they were using as a shell for their sex trafficking crimes. But he studied and also organized events where you had very scholarly scientists that came through, and they discussed things like anti-gravity, dark matter, antimatter, Nephilim, He was using both the compound at Little James Island in the Bahamas, there where his temple was at, and also the one that was in Mexico as well. One last thing in regards to Jeffrey Epstein, and that is a letter included in the Epstein's 50th birthday book has eerie connections. It says that to concepts described in the Law of One. It says that for those who don't know, the Law of One is a series of books containing a body of alleged channeled material from an extraterrestrial interdimensional entity that went by the name of Ra. These alleged communications revolved mostly around spiritual concepts, including that of the choice between the positive and negative polarities, what we tend to call good and evil. Below is a selection of quotes from the material. Here, the origin group found fertile soil in which to plant the seeds of negativity. These seeds, as always, being those of the elite, the different, those who manipulate or enslave others. The purpose of the Orion group, as mentioned before, is conquest and enslavement. That is done by finding and establishing an elite and causing others to serve the elite through various devices. Now, if that doesn't sound like the whole operation of Jeffrey Epstein and his connections to people like the Rothschilds, Bilderbergs, those in the higher upper echelons of our economy, our global economy, manipulating them, he went from being an uneducated or undereducated because he didn't finish college, teaching at a well-known college in New York, to becoming a financial officer on Wall Street, to then managing the portfolios of the uber rich, to owning his own island in the Bahamas and a compound in Mexico and becoming a billionaire himself. That in itself, it is mind-blowing. And another thing, he was studying other things, like I said earlier.
They said they were working with dark matter, which I think you can think sounds like antimatter. The scientists, they said, were working with dark matter and doing things they weren't supposed to be doing with it. And I said, what were they doing? They said they were trying to create their own universes, their own wormholes. Now, what does that sound like? Those of you who know, you know what's going on right now, don't you? The collider experiments. If you look it up on the internet, you'll see it. It was going on this last year. These scientists were trying to create a wormhole, trying to create a new universe. And they have built this huge machine. They said it is the most powerful machine in the history of the world to shoot atoms and things at each other. And the explosion, they said, they're hoping, create a new universe and create a wormhole. And this is why they're always saying, we want you to know these things because you're repeating the same mistakes now. Well, these scientists that are doing the collider experiment are working with antimatter. And this is what they said they did in Atlantis. They were working with dark matter. And when they were doing it, it got away from them. And it began to destroy the grids of the earth. So they said we had to step in and destroy it and stop it, because if it would have continued, the entire earth would have collapsed. All the grids collapsed, and it would have had an escalating effect, and the grids of the entire solar system, the grids of the whole universe would eventually all collapsed on itself. This is what they keep saying they're afraid of.
So I'm going to stop it right there. Please let me know what your beliefs are. What do you think? And how all of this connects to each other, and these beings that are now making themselves visible to society. What do you think? How do you connect this to your own faith? Do you believe in God? Do you believe in the Bible? That's my faith. I don't push my faith on anyone, but that is what I believe in, and it never fails me. Even with science and academia, I always relate to the Bible. Please like, share, and subscribe. I wish you well, and thank you so much for taking your time to watch the video. You have a blessed day.